I'm sorry, that's impossible.
Please don't use that word, Wendy.
What other word could I use?
I think what Wendy means is that the FBI, they don't make any agreements that aren't advantageous to them.
I am aware that I will have to make some concessions.
Concessions?
Yes. Concessions.
Using a flash forward, it is shown how the Byrde family is apparently wrapping up their life in the Ozarks. Seemingly on their way to a better future, Marty has a moment of inattention and causes their van to crash, crushing the good beginnings of a new life. In the present, Marty and Wendy are washing away Helen's brains from their hair and faces and join Navarro at his party. With the US Army having wiped out his competition, the Lagunas cartel, thanks to the Byrdes, Navarro is in a happy mood. He then introduces his nephew Javi to Marty and Wendy, with Javi remarking that the Byrdes need to deal with Darlene since she is making a comeback in the narcotics business and thus a competitor. Later, when Navarro is alone with the Byrdes, he reveals to them that Javi is searching for a weakness to overthrow him and that he wants out of the underworld. He wants immunity from the US government on top of free movement between Mexico and the United States in exchange for concessions. Meanwhile, Ruth has joined Darlene and Wyatt in the revival of Darlene's heroin business. Learning from her time with Marty, Ruth buys the Lazy O Motel to launder their dirty money. Sometime later, she is visited by Jonah, who gives her Ben's ashes since he knows that his mother had Ben killed and is angry with her. With the bond between him and his mother further decaying, he eventually teams up with Ruth to launder the money from Darlene's business. When Marty and Wendy then return home and the Byrde family is reunited, they are visited by Mel, a private investigator who is looking for Helen to sign her divorce papers. But the Byrdes tell him that they don't know a thing. Unsatisfied with the lack of answers, Mel visits Sheriff Nix and urges him to go to Helen's house to find out where she is. Reluctantly, the sheriff decides to do just that. But when he arrives at Helen's house, Javi opens up and kills the sheriff point blank and takes his body to the Byrdes to be incinerated, not knowing that Jonah is witnessing it all. Trying to launder Omar Navarro himself, Marty goes to see Maya, who has recently become a mother. He asks her what it would take to clean Navarro, to which she responds that he would need to give them names, inside info of his operation, and do time in jail. At the Byrdes' house, Jonah reveals to Wendy that he has given Ben to Ruth, causing a fuming Wendy to visit Ruth to take Ben back. But Ruth stands her ground and has Wendy leave empty-handed. With her first batches ready, Darlene visits Frank Sr., the leader of the KC mob, to have him again distribute her heroin. But with Sheriff Nix missing, they have lost their protection and Frank declines her offer. After her fight with Ruth, Wendy goes to see Jim, a very connected man, to have her foundation and herself become a political powerhouse in the region. Following her conversation with Jim, she and Marty meet with Claire Shaw, the CEO of a legal drug manufacturing company, and offer to cut her costs by supplying her with cheap cartel drugs in exchange for a public donation of $150 million to Wendy's foundation. Pressured by the possible bankruptcy of her company, Claire agrees. Meanwhile, Ruth is trying another distribution route by convincing the famous chef Carrie Stone to promote Darlene's heroin. However, while Ruth believes to have a winner there, Darlene refuses to sell to Carrie since she doesn't want to give Ruth more power in her enterprise. After having convinced Maya to meet with Navarro, the Byrdes have the FBI agent sleep at their house to be picked up by cartel goons and brought to the Jefe himself. On his plane, he's told by Maya that he needs to give up a lot of information about the cartel and serve time in jail. When Navarro refuses to answer in disagreement, Maya leaves the plane. Back at the Byrdes' house, Wendy becomes angry when Jonah declines her peace offer in the form of a shrine to Ben. Enraged, she cuts off the electricity so that Jonah cannot launder any more money for Ruth, inadvertently forcing him to work from the Lazy O. The Byrdes, except for Jonah, then leave for Chicago, where Charlotte meets with Erin, Helen's daughter. Charlotte tells her that her mother is dead and that they should stop searching for her or else they might upend dead too. Marty then has his own meeting with Claire to test the quality of Navarro's drugs, but is surprised when Javi shows up and hijacks the meeting by introducing himself as the top dog to Claire. Overhearing a gun sale from Javi, Marty calls Navarro and advises him to inform the FBI about the weapons transaction to show his willingness to cooperate. When Javi then goes dining with Marty, Wendy, and Charlotte, he is called and told that his guns have been seized by the US government. During a press conference, Wendy tells the media that her foundation's new rehab centers, funded by Claire's company, are inspired by her missing brother Ben, who was an addict. Realizing that Wendy is straight up lying, Mel visits her and Ben's father, Nathan, who tells the private investigator that Ben was not an addict. On the other drugs front, Ruth takes Carrie and his friends to the Bell Casino. However, when Carrie overdoses on Darlene's heroin, everything starts crumbling down. Ruth quickly responds and saves Carrie's life by giving him an injection. She then goes to Darlene to tell her what has happened, taking with her Carrie's driver. But when the driver starts to blackmail Darlene, she kills him on the spot and orders Ruth and Wyatt to dispose of the body. Following the events at the Bell, Ruth is visited by Sheriff Nix's replacement, Sheriff Guerrero. She asks Ruth about the events and the missing driver, but Ruth tells her that she doesn't know a thing. When Guerrero then visits the Byrdes, Wendy sneakily points her towards Ruth and Darlene, hoping to get her son back if Darlene's empire falls. Frustrated over the increased FBI busts of his deals, Javi obtains body cam footage of one of the busts and sees Agent Maya. Realizing they have a rat, he orders all heroin and other shipments stopped until they find the snitch, which means that Marty can also no longer supply Claire's company. Out of options, he visits Ruth to strike a bargain for Darlene's heroin. Ruth agrees to sell the heroin to Marty and they meet up with Claire, who also approves the quality. Unbeknownst to them, Darlene has already approached Frank Jr. and has sold him the drugs. The same drugs that Ruth is planning to sell to Marty and Claire. While driving through the city, Wendy and Marty see missing posters of Ben hanging everywhere. Believing Jonah to be behind this, Wendy approaches him and he reveals that Darlene has put those posters up. Wendy then goes to meet with Senator Shaver, who has her, via Maya, retrieve an FBI file in exchange for sitting on Wendy's foundation board. But even for Wendy, the senator proves to be a highly corrupt man when he reveals that his grandson has produced voting machines that can be tampered with, and so he wanted to know if the FBI is on his family's tail. Which they aren't. Back in the Ozarks, Ruth discovers that her drugs are already sold and teams up with Marty, Frank Jr. and Claire's security guy to locate the narcotics and manages to buy it all back. After officially filing a missing persons report for Ben, Wendy calls Darlene and sarcastically thanks her for hanging up the posters. Angered that Jonah has betrayed her, Darlene scares him into revealing that he had seen his parents get rid of Nix's body. Getting even more angry, she drives to Wendy and confronts her about this, but unexpectedly suffers a heart attack. Instead of calling an ambulance, Wendy decides to do nothing and simply watch Darlene squirm and fight for her life. However, it is soon revealed that Wendy had later called an ambulance and saved Darlene's life. Blaming Ruth for her situation, since Ruth had helped Marty and thus betrayed them, Darlene tells Wyatt to cut Ruth off. Wanting Jim to exclusively work for them, Wendy reveals to him their entire operation and that they have been always working for the cartel. While in Mexico, Navarro tells Javi that he is stepping out of the game and that Javi is to succeed him. Being promoted to Jefe, Javi goes to the Ozarks and informs Marty about the change in leadership. Needing an explanation, Marty calls Navarro, who tells him that he is planning to give the whole cartel, including Javi, to the FBI. At Darlene's house, Frank Sr. visits her and warns her about dealing with his son. Instead of a verbal reply, Frank is given a non-verbal answer when Darlene blasts a hole in his body with a shotgun. Horrified when seeing Frank Sr.'s dead body, Wyatt plans to run away with Ruth and baby Zeke, but changes his mind when he finds Darlene heartbroken after she was informed that child services may take away Zeke. In another attempt to get her son back, Wendy tampers with his laundering software and Jonah is forced to call in Marty to fix it. Marty quickly realizes that Wendy is behind it, and Jonah also finds out when Sam tells him that his mother was in his motel room. In Kansas City, Ruth informs Frank Jr. about his father's death at the hands of Darlene, but has him promise to not kill her outright. That night at the Byrdes' home, Marty gets a phone call from the FBI to deliver Navarro in 12 hours. After having proposed to Darlene, Wyatt goes to Ruth and tells her that he's not running away with her. Saddened by it, but still wanting her nephew to have a happy life, she goes to meet with Frank Jr. and convinces him to not kill Darlene. At an abandoned mall, Navarro and the Byrdes meet with Maya and the FBI. Navarro is ready to give it all up, but is angered when the FBI tells him that they have a new deal for him. He is to remain the head of the cartel for 5 more years and needs to supply them with information. After those 5 years, he can become a free man. Angered at the deceit but having no other option, Navarro accepts the deal. Also feeling betrayed by this deal is Maya, so when Navarro is about to leave the country, she publicly arrests him, forcing her FBI superiors to play along. Receiving word of his uncle's arrest, Javi has Jim call Marty so that he can kill him for betraying the cartel. When Marty then arrives, he is beaten up, but Wendy manages to save his life by having Navarro call Javi and tell Javi that the Byrdes are not the enemy. While Darlene and Wyatt are being married, the Byrdes and the FBI meet with Javi, the new head of the Navarro cartel. They offer Javi the same deal as Navarro, but 10 years instead of 5, with Javi happily agreeing with his new FBI protection. The next stop on Javi's route is shown to be Darlene and Wyatt. Tired of Darlene's interference in the drug business, Javi kills her and Wyatt without any remorse. When Ruth later arrives at Darlene's house, she is shocked and horrified at the scene. She immediately suspects Frank Jr., but he swears to his innocence. Believing him, she visits the Byrdes, shotgun in hand. There she learns from Jonah that the name of the killer is Javi, and she swears vengeance for her nephew, even if that means that she will have to pay for it with her own life.
Do not hurt this man.
Or what, your whole fucking family will be murdered, huh? If you want to stop me, you're gonna have to fucking